Ever get that, like, you know that feeling that the stuff you buy is somehow tied to, like, big global
Oh,
things?
yeah, definitely.
Well, today we're gonna kind of like peel back the layers on that, right?
Hmm.
We're doing a deep dive into President Trump's 25% tariffs on stuff coming in from Canada and Mexico.
Okay.
And we're gonna look at how those tariffs could really slam the brakes on the trucking industry. And by extension, like, your wallet.
Makes sense.
Welcome to Logistics Pulse, sponsored by Mothership. Skip the broker to save big on LTL shipments, or deliver same day nationwide. For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
It is interesting. We hear about tariffs all the time, right?
Yeah.
But we don't really dig into how they actually affect our daily lives.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And to get that complete picture, we've got some great insights from both sides of the border.
Okay.
The Canadian Trucking Alliance, the CTA, and the American Trucking Associations.
Gotcha.
So by the end of this deep dive, you'll get a good grasp on how these tariffs are shaking up the trucking industry,
Okay.
which, at the end of the day, that's what determines the price and availability of basically everything you buy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Every
It really makes you think, like, who's going to feel the impact first?
Yeah.
Where's it going to hit hardest right out of the gate?
Well, the Canadian Trucking Alliance, the CTA, they're not holding back. They're saying these tariffs could be like a potential catastrophe,
Really?
especially because, they're already dealing with the toughest freight economy in like, what, 40 years?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been rough.
Yeah, I can see why they'd be worried. I mean, imagine trying to keep your business afloat with these tiny margins.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden, bam, you got this like 25% increase in your costs.
right.
I mean, that's the reality these trucking companies are looking at.
Yeah.
Job losses, companies closing down, and ultimately just fewer trucks on the road to get those goods delivered.
And here's another thing. The CTA did a survey.
Okay.
Businesses are already seeing order cancellations between 20% and 80%. And get this, this was before the tariffs even kicked in.
Wow, that's pretty wild. I mean, it seems like, customers are kind of freaking out a bit, right? I mean, canceling orders left and right because they're worried about prices skyrocketing or major disruptions in the supply chain.
Right. Yeah.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. And it's not just the big trucking companies feeling the pressure. The CTA is saying even private fleets are getting nervous.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So for those who may not know, what's a private fleet?
Yeah, good point.
You think of a company like Walmart or Amazon, right?
Mhm.
They own and run their own trucks
Right.
to move their own stuff. They're basically cutting out the middleman.
Okay, I got it. So even though they're not directly paying for outside trucking, they're still exposed to these rising costs.
Exactly. If the companies they're buying their stuff from are paying more to move it because of these tariffs, that cost is eventually going to land on them.
Yeah.
And who do you think ends up paying the bill?
Yeah, that's true. So it's us. And that actually reminds me of Mike Millian from the Private Motor Truck Council of Canada.
Oh.
He basically put out this like stark warning
Oh, no.
saying these tariffs, they're basically gonna make lives more expensive.
He's right. He's totally right. I mean, when trucking costs go up because of tariffs, well, guess what? The price of the stuff they're moving goes up too, right?
Yeah.
It's basic economics. And those extra costs, they trickle down
Yeah.
until they hit you right in the face at the store.
Ouch. So it's like a chain reaction, right?
It is.
So, okay, what's the Canadian government doing about all this? The CPA seems to have a whole bunch of things they want, right?
Yeah, they're asking the government to step in with some help. Get rid of the carbon tax, lower the diesel tax, give the trucking industry some targeted tax relief.
Mm.
And they want a bigger meal allowance for drivers too.
Oh, okay.
And they want to make sure any help they offer gets to, all the drivers, whether they're on payroll or independent contractors.
That's a pretty comprehensive plan. It sounds like they're trying to, tackle this from all sides.
Yeah, they are. Each of those things they're asking for
Right.
is meant to take some of the financial pressure off the industry.
Okay.
Get rid of the carbon tax and lowering the diesel tax.
Yeah.
That would save them a ton on fuel right away,
Right.
which, that's one of their biggest expenses, right?
For sure.
And bumping up the meal allowance, that makes sense too. Drivers are facing less demand,
Right.
might be stuck on the road longer, eating out more often.
Makes sense.
So they need that extra help.
And it seems like they're not just looking for quick fixes either, right? The CTA is also pushing for some long-term changes,
Oh, yeah.
urging the government to focus on Improving productivity and efficiency in the trucking industry.
Yeah, that's a key point. I mean, when the trucking industry runs smoothly, everyone benefits.
Uh,
Think about it. Like, if trucks can move stuff faster and cheaper, that means lower prices for you,
yeah.
maybe even faster deliveries.
Now, this whole situation isn't as simple as it might seem. I mean, while Canadian trucking is definitely feeling the heat, American trucking associations, they're kind of singing a similar tune, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they're not exactly thrilled about these tariffs either.
Huh, really? They're not rooting for them,
Yeah.
even though they're aimed at Canada and Mexico?
Nope. In fact, the American Trucking Associations, the ATA, they're actually publicly against these tariffs.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So the ATA, an American group, they're opposed to these tariffs. What's the logic there?
Yeah, well, their biggest concern is that these tariffs will kind of like, undo all the good that came from the USMCA,
Okay,
that updated trade deal between the US, Mexico, and Canada.
gotcha.
So basically, the ATA is saying these tariffs go against everything the USMCA was supposed to do, which was to make trade between our countries, smoother and more efficient.
Right, like,
Right.
why make a deal if you're just going to throw up roadblocks?
Exactly. They're saying it's like hitting the brakes just as the engine was starting to run properly.
Okay.
Now, they've also brought up this interesting point about nearshoring and how it's becoming more and more popular.
Shoring.
Yeah. So what is that exactly? And why does it matter in this situation?
So nearshoring is basically bringing production closer to home.
Okay.
Instead of relying on factories, way overseas, companies are choosing to make stuff in places like Mexico and Canada,
Right.
which makes sense.
Oh,
Cuts down on shipping costs, gets products to customers faster,
yeah.
and it gives companies more flexibility to adapt to changes.
The ATA claims that 100,000 truckers
Ah.
who handle 85% of trade with Mexico and 67% with Canada, they're all going to be directly hit by these tariffs.
100,000. That's a huge number. It really shows how connected our economies are in North America.
Right.
Like, this isn't just going to hurt a few businesses. It's going to have this like ripple effect
Yeah.
across the entire supply chain.
And then there's the financial hit the ATA is warning about. They're saying truck prices could jump up by like $35,000,
Oh.
which is that's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, new trucks, fuel, parts, everything's going to get more expensive because of these tariffs.
Right.
It's going to squeeze the trucking companies.
Yeah.
Make it harder for them to stay in business.
Okay. So just to recap, both Canadian and American trucking groups, they're both against these tariffs. They're predicting all sorts of bad stuff.
Yeah.
Job losses, higher costs for companies, and of course, higher prices for us.
It's not looking good.
Mm.
Seems like everyone's bracing for impact, except maybe the folks who put these tariffs in place in the first place.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It definitely makes you wonder, like, if tariffs are such a bad solution, what are the alternatives?
Yeah, good question.
And what other unintended consequences might we see, beyond the trucking industry?
Those are great questions, and we're going to get into those right after this. Yeah. It's important to remember that governments use tariffs as a way to protect their own industries or to, try and level the playing field when it comes to trade between countries.
Yeah.
But as we're seeing here, tariffs can have some pretty nasty side effects that no one really saw coming.
Yeah, that's pretty clear. So if tariffs aren't the answer, then what are some other things the government could do?
Right.
I mean, how could they achieve their goals without triggering all these negative consequences we've been talking about?
That's the big question, and there's no easy solution, really.
Yeah.
It all depends on what the government's actually trying to fix.
So it's more like you need a tailored approach, right?
Yeah,
Not just a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
exactly. I mean, some things they could try, maybe targeted investments in certain industries here at home,
Okay.
or maybe working out trade deals that are a little fairer for everyone,
Uh-huh.
or even, stricter rules on some imports.
Yeah. Those options definitely sound more thought out than just, slapping on a tariff.
Right.
But I'm guessing they come with their own set of problems, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right.
Every decision has a, flip side. For example, investing in domestic industries, that's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
Could mean higher taxes
Right.
or cuts in other programs, and trade deals. Those are a nightmare to work out.
Yeah.
Takes forever, and there's
Uh-huh.
no guarantee it'll work out in the end. And then stricter regulations. I mean, sometimes you need them,
Right.
but they can also, slow things down, create a lot of red tape.
So it sounds like finding the right answer means really understanding what might happen, right?
Yeah,
Weighing all the good and bad of each option.
exactly. And remember, these unintended consequences of tariffs, they don't just affect the trucking industry, right?
Right, you mentioned that earlier. So what are some ways these tariffs could, spill over into other parts of the economy?
Well, one likely scenario is that, as prices go up because of the tariffs, people start spending less.
Right.
And that could have a ripple effect on all sorts of industries, retail, manufacturing, even tourism.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, if you're paying more for the basics, you're going to have less money to spend on other stuff.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of, how this affects relationships between countries.
Right.
Putting tariffs on your trading partners, that can create tension.
Yeah.
Make it harder to work together on other important stuff like, security, climate change, even pandemic response.
So these tariffs could actually snowball into a much bigger issue, right?
They could.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
To understand how trade policy works.
Right.
And to really think about what might happen when you do something like imposing tariffs.
It's been really interesting to dig into this.
Yeah, me too.
It's amazing how something that seems so simple, like adding a tariff,
Right.
can have such, huge and unpredictable consequences.
It really shows how connected our world is, right?
Yeah.
A decision made in one country can have a huge impact on other countries
Yeah.
and on whole industries. It's a constant reminder that we need to, think globally and act strategically
Right.
to make sure everyone has a good future.
Well said. So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some of the main takeaways you hope our listener walks away with after exploring the world of trucking tariffs?
I think the biggest takeaway is that tariffs are they're rarely a simple solution.
Right.
They might seem like a quick fix, but they usually come with a lot of baggage that you can't just ignore.
Okay.
We've seen how these tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods, they could really hurt the trucking industry,
Yeah.
both here and in those countries.
Yeah.
Could mean job losses, higher costs for companies,
Yeah.
and ultimately, higher prices for consumers.
It's like that domino effect, right?
It is.
One thing leads to another, and then we're all paying more at the store.
Exactly. And beyond just the immediate economic impact, there's the long-term effects on trade relations,
Yeah.
diplomacy, even consumer behavior.
Speaking of consumer behavior, that's an interesting point. What do you think? If these tariffs stick around for a while, how will they change how people shop and what they buy?
That's a great question, and I'm sure a lot of economists are trying to figure that out right now.
Yeah.
We might see people becoming more, more sensitive to price.
Okay.
Maybe choosing cheaper brands or even cutting back on certain things altogether.
So maybe we'll see people buying more stuff made here, even if it's a little more expensive.
It's possible. We might also see more people shopping online,
Yeah.
trying to find better deals, avoid those higher prices in stores.
That's an interesting point. The online market could get even more competitive as people hunt for bargains.
Yeah, it's always changing, and these tariffs could really shake things up, both for consumers and for retailers.
This has been a really insightful deep dive.
Agreed.
We've covered a lot, from the immediate worries of the trucking industry to the bigger, economic and global implications of these tariffs.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listener with something to think about.
Okay, sounds good.
So we've talked about, how these tariffs might mess with businesses and the economy as a whole. But let's bring it home a bit.
Okay.
Let's get personal for a second. If these tariffs stick around for a while, how do you think they might change, your own shopping habits? What would you do differently at the checkout?
It's a really good question. We don't always stop and think about how much, global stuff actually affects our everyday choices.
Right.
Even something as basic as, buying groceries.
Exactly. Yeah, we might see people switching brands,
Yeah.
maybe looking for more local stuff,
Uh-huh.
or even, cooking at home more instead of eating out.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Definitely. And this whole situation really shows how important it is to, stay informed.
Yeah.
Understand how these policy decisions can have a ripple effect. It's not just about politics, right? It's about how those decisions affect the things we buy, the prices we pay,
Uh-huh.
and basically all the choices we make every day.
Well said. This deep dive has been quite a journey, and I hope our listener has a new way of looking at, trade, tariffs and how things happening far away can actually hit us right here at home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we're all connected and our choices, whether it's personal choices or, choices we make as a society, they all have consequences.
Yeah, for sure.
So until next time, keep an eye out for those connections,
Okay,
whether you're at the store or reading the news. You never know what you might find.
that's true.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
You got it.
For more insights like these, don't forget to subscribe to Logistics Pulse on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.